Okay, let's try this for a third time. My wife just ran the vacuum cleaner in the middle of my recording. Oops, it's been so long since I've done a YouTube on-camera film. It's been so long I miss myself. That's how long it's been. One of the great things about YouTube for me so far is that I have introduced people to the fact that I keep a journal. I've kept a journal every day since 1993, but it actually goes back to the time I was in elementary school, is when I started writing sort of stream of consciousness things in a notebook. I don't know why. I also completely plagiarized Good Guys Wear Black with Chuck Norris from like the late 70s, which if you haven't seen is life-changing. And I plagiarized that in a journal using the exact names of the characters in the movie, and then I combined it with like some Vietnam era thing, like John Wayne Green Berets or Platoon prior to Platoon, Full Metal Jacket before Full Metal Jacket kind of thing. And it's just violence. You know, I was a little boy. That's what we think about. Not advisable. So keeping a journal is incredibly fun and strategic and important, I think, especially for documentary photographers. And this film is really about how I use a journal specifically during my projects, because a lot of people have reached out and asked how I do that. I'm going to go through a sort of an intro. We're going to hit on some topics and points. It's very loose. I just jotted these down literally in like 3 minutes and said, let's just go for it. Now, over the years, I have kept every kind of journal imaginable. Look at all this stuff it's a Beyond sticker, stuff that's falling out of my journals. And I treat them with utmost respect. So I've got little journals and I've got sort of medium journals, and I like those. And I've got like moleskin big journals, and I really like those as well. The journal that I'm keeping right now looks like this. And I'm going to do some top downs in a minute to show you exactly what these sort of look like. I'll probably show you more of this one, which isn't filled out, because this is the same version of a book, but it's totally filled out. And I don't really want you to see it. So we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about this. And then I've even branched out a little bit, and I've done some larger books. This is a hardcover journal that's called Let It Come Down, which is a reference to Paul Bowles, the author. And if you don't know Paul Bowles, well then you just scored. You don't even have to watch the rest of this film. Just stop watching and immediately look up Paul Bowles. He's a musician, a playwright, an author, an American. He's passed away, lived in North Africa. Amazing story. You might know Sheltering Sky. That's what they made into a movie. We're also going to talk about the last time I actually went in the field. And I've talked about this before. Last time I went in the field with intention, and I'll show you how I used my journal for this project. But this is not a film about my mate gourd. That film is coming later, so if you're here for the mate gourd, sign off. Let's just hit some points here first, talking about the journal. Let's talk about my work first, because I think that is key to why the journal is so important. I studied photojournalism. I didn't study photography. Those were two separate majors, in case you didn't know. Photojournalism had to do with news stories, with making images that had a news angle, a time element, could be a single image for a spot news kind of thing, or it could be in-depth photo essays. And that's really where my heart was. My heart was in long form stories, photo essays, creating bodies of work on a singular topic. That lends itself to having a narrative, and the narrative lends itself to keeping a journal, because in addition to the photographs, you need to fill in with copy to make sure that your story, your point, your idea is getting across. Makes sense, right? Okay, so that's number one, documentary. I don't walk around, for the most part, shooting random photographs. That's a whole separate skill. It's a whole separate style and genre of photography. I do it from time to time. Very rarely. Most of the time when I pick up a camera, it's to work on a specific theme, and that's still true today all these years later, something like 30-something years later. Another point I need to make up front here is that the journal is for you. The journal is not for me. Your journal is not for me, and my journal is not for you. My journal and your journal is not for them. It's not for the internet. It's not for public. And that's one of the reasons people have so much trouble starting journals today, is that everything we do is seemingly put online to gain approval or gain following or gain traction or notoriety, etc. If you're putting your journal online, it's not a journal. It's a marketing tool. The journal is about honesty. The journal is about laying bare what is actually happening in your head, not my head, not anyone else's. It's what's happening. All those random thoughts that often you try to drive to the side, The journal is about saying, I don't want to drive those to the side. I want to bring those in and put them down on paper and try to make sense of it. Those thoughts, those random things are what make you, you. If you're worried about what your journal looks like, if you're worried about the pen you're using, if you're worried about the paper, if you're worried about how artistic the design of the pages look, you're not really journaling. You could be making an art book. There's nothing wrong with that. But you're not really journaling. And I think people put pressure on themselves to turn this into something it's not. And so, again, it's kind of scary at times to be truthful and honest in today's world. And that's what the journal's about. So the journal I mentioned, last week someone wrote me and said, hey, you've been talking a lot about this journal. Can I buy one? And I said, I don't really sell the journals. I don't really sell any of my books for the most part. A little series I do, but that's about it. And he said, I really, really, really want one of those. And so I turned it on. And so if you go to the blurb site and you go to my author page and you see the individual book, you can actually buy one of these journals if you want it. My advice is to not buy one. My advice is to make your own. That's the point of me doing this film. In a nutshell, before we get to the top-down nuts and bolts, the meat of this story, I used the journal for, I'm going to say, 5 things while I'm doing a documentary project. The journal is with me all the time. It's either in my shoulder bag or my backpack. It is always there. You cannot leave it behind and think you're going to go back to it and remember what you intended to put in it in the first place. It does not happen and it does not work. It doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for me or anyone else. That's just the way it is. Once something hits you, you need to immediately put it in the book or it's gone forever. So for example, last week I was hiking a peak called Cerro Grande, which is not a big deal. It's like a 10,000 foot peak. And about halfway up, I started writing a script in my head. Now I didn't basically say to myself, I'm going to start writing a script. It just happened. I was watching this woodpecker, actually, three-toed woodpecker. If you saw my film, you know what I'm talking about. And I was like, oh man, this is coming to me. And it just started to go. And I had my journal in my backpack and I said to myself, I'm gonna make a push for this little summit. And then as soon as I get there, I'm gonna sit down and start writing, which I did. The problem was my fountain pen ran out of ink immediately and I forgot to put extra cartridges in my backpack. So it didn't work and I lost it. It was gone. By the time I got back to my van, I could not remember and sequence what I had. And it was really good. And I missed it and it's gone. So you have to keep it with you all the time. So I use the journal for number 1, logistics, number 2, observation, number 3, stream of consciousness, number 4 as evidence, and number 5 as additional visual landing space. Sketches, notes, I shoot Polaroids and stick them in. I make photographs, make prints and stick those in as references. So logistics, number 1 is about, hey, where I need to be, who I need to talk to, etc. The stuff that you have to do to do projects, long-term projects. Number 2, it's observations. The film I did yesterday about van life, there's a line in that script about seeing a Dodge Cummins 2500 with an elk rack in the back and hunters coming back with their quads on trailers and getting ready for the drive home. That was observed out the window of my van as I passed by in a dollar store parking lot. So that whole scene coagulated into the rack from looked like a royal elk, a big bull elk, a navy blue Cummins 2500 diesel pickup, which is like common out here. It's the Toyota Camry of this region. And then dollar store, which is like even in these tiny remote towns, the dollar stores are like gathering places. And so all of that came just passing by. And so I immediately have to pull the van over and make these notes. I cannot go back 5 hours later and fabricate that in my head. I lose detail. So you pull over and do it. Stream of consciousness, again, is about all those thoughts that are seemingly random, but they're not. They're the thoughts that make you, you. Number 4 is evidence. A lot of times when you're doing documentary projects, you can have someone in your pictures come back on you at a later date and say, I didn't say that, or I didn't do that, or I wasn't there. And when you have these notes and timelines and dialogue, it's evidence. It is testimony as to where you were, what was happening and what was transpiring. Trust me, that comes into play a lot if you're a professional doc shooter. And number 5, additional visual landing space, which again is if I'm posting prints in, etc. In terms of brand, and you're gonna think I'm a homer here, you're gonna think I'm shilling blurb, but there's a method to my madness. I have used everything. I've used the dollar store composition books that we all had in elementary school, the black and white ones you can buy at the supermarket. I've used Moleskine. I've used every conceivable kind of journal. I've even used these giant oversized books where one book is the entire year, and they end up weighing like 20 pounds. I don't use those anymore because I can't travel with them. What I use now, oddly enough, is a Blurb, what Blurb calls notebooks, and I call notebooks and journals. This is a 6x9. Again, this is the one that I have available online if anybody wants one. And again, I'm telling you not to buy it, but make your own. It's probably 200 pages. And when I first started using the Blurb notebooks, and again, I'm going to go over this in detail about what it is, I thought they would, because they're perfect bound, and I thought if you continue to bend them backwards, that it would just wear out, right? But it hasn't. And I'm almost through with this one. I've got this much left, this much filled, and I bend it back all the time, and it just doesn't die. And so these are customizable, and that's what I want to get to when I show you these from the top down. So let's go there, and hopefully this will help you give a little more insight into how I use these specifically for doc projects. All right, here we go. Back with a little top-down madness here, if you will. Outside, it is 28 degrees and dumping snow here in Santa Fe. It's been snowing for about 2 days now, which is pretty great. Early in the season, we need the moisture so bad. It was the driest summer in 14 years, so whatever we can get. Okay, as I mentioned before, I've used many, many kinds of journals over the years. This happens to be a Blurb journal. This is from some race I did, and I'm not really sure. It's a 30K. This is from a 30K. This has nothing to do with my journal. This is a journal. This is a Blurb journal. And as you can see, when I said I use it for additional visual landing space, this is an image I made in the LA River. And this is kind of what my stuff will look like. This is another LA River photograph that I've written over. I add little sort of art things from time to time. That was an image I had in Life magazine back in the day. And this is a ticket to Vanessa Williams. No memory of that whatsoever. Go boards, etc. Lots and lots and lots of writing. These journals are not what I would call beautiful, right? I'm not here to make an art book. I'm using them for notes. This says, now is a lucky time for you to take a chance. And Death Valley, again, lots of imagery, lots and lots of copy. And there's an old Polaroid, etc. projects. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Palm Springs Photo Festival, by far the best photo festival in America. If you've never been, what are you waiting for? It is completely unique. I think I've been like 12 or 14 years. Stamps, no idea where I got them. Lots and lots of copy. I'm gonna get to this more in a minute. A lot of you might be using moleskins, and I do like moleskins in the sense that they lay flat, which is kind of cool, and you got a lot of real estate. So I also, as you know, read a lot. I read about 80 books a year, and I use my iPad Pro to take notes. And this is a book about T.E. Lawrence, the history of basically Lawrence of Arabia, if you don't know T.E. Lawrence. And I keep all the pages of notes, and then they're printed out here as well, and I go back and reference all the books that I read. Yes, I'm a bit strange when it comes to that. I also play Go, and I play chess. Don't judge me. These are the primary books we are going to talk about. This is my current Shifter journal. Remember, this film, before I got derailed and started rambling, is really about using it for documentary work. So one of the things that I love about these Blurb journals is that I fill out the inside of the book with a variety of different things, including copy. This was a journal about a trip to Uruguay. And so I took the copy from my Uruguay story, I put it in, I used the shape tool in the Blurb software to create some little oddities like this. I put my press credential, again, more copy, and I started filling the book out with some of the work and images that I made in Uruguay. And there's no real, like I said, this was not a book that was intended for the public. This was just me having a book that I can recap my experience in Bolivia. And again, just simple shape tool, copy, and photographs of my project. And I worked on this project with 3 other photographers, and again, long-term, I shouldn't say that on this particular project. It was probably took us about 2 weeks. There were 4 of us total, and it was a project about the British industrialization of Uruguay and the subsequent return of those industries to the Uruguayans. You know, I'm sure it's a story you've all been following, right? Again, grid pages, and what I love about the Blurb journals is that I can change up the pages. So some of these books have grid, some have lined pages, some have spot pages, and some have no backgrounds at all. And you can mix and match inside of a book. So lots and lots of stuff. And again, same book. Let me just go through. That's the same spread with copy all over it. That's all I'm going to show you because it's my journal. I've also experimented a little bit with larger hardcover. And again, reference to Paul Bowles. If you don't know Paul Bowles, I just made your day. You've just got your next year and a half of reading material sorted out for you. I did the same thing here, and I called this a companion notebook. This is a notebook that is a companion to my magazine series called Essay. This was an issue on Peru called Lost City. And again, you'll see I've got spot pages here. I've got images from the actual project, images from other projects. I've got grid pages. I've got lined pages, etc. You can do whatever you want in these, and I love it. Okay, last thing before this film ends up being like a 2.5-hour feature. I've showed this before. This is my magazine from Albania from last May of 2019, the last time I went in the field with intention as a photographer, if you will. And I don't get many chances to do that these days, sadly, because it can be a very important part of my job to be able to show y'all how to do. See, I worked y'all in there. I spent 25 years in Texas. I haven't said y'all in 25 years, but I threw it in there because I can, and it's my channel. So I built this magazine in real time as I worked in Albania. So I would shoot and write all day, every day, and then at night I would lay this magazine out in real time, and it was a blast. And if you haven't done it, I highly recommend it. Declassificaur, which is declassified in Albanian. This is a book of combination of 2 or 3 different kinds of photographs. I call it an autobiographical work of fiction. And as you'll see here, this is a double exposure. There were a lot of double exposures in this book. That was my visual style in trying to convey this story about Albania being isolated for 40 years and then being emerging into the modern world and into a modern democracy. This says, the battle for Albania is in our mind. And this is where we're talking about journaling on a project. This journal is with me 24 hours a day. It is always within arm's reach. This quote, the battle for Albania is in our mind, came from me standing on a ferry, getting ready to go north up country on the ferry, standing in a ferry and around the parking lot, overhearing conversations about Albanians talking about their country. I cannot let that sit until later in the day and try to recall all of these details. That my pen is out immediately, my journal is out immediately, and I'm sketching these quotes down. Then I go back and I'm making photographs. I've got a little sort of history. This isn't a quote. This is me making sort of a historical statement about the country. And then about every 10 pages, you have a page of oversized copy. There was a period of 14 years where things were very hard. Russia left, including their embassy. China came, and so did rationing. There was only one kind of shoe in 2 colors and one shirt also in 2 colors. If you went to a friend's house, it was likely you would be wearing the same shoe or the same shirt. My family was happy. I was a vegetarian because there wasn't enough meat, milk, eggs, cheese, whatever to go around. You had to get coupons for cooking oil, salt, flour, and sugar, but you had to get up in midnight and stand in line until 6 or 7 in the morning to make sure you got what they had. That is a direct quote from a conversation with an Albanian person who was with us for the entire trip. He was awesome. And a lot of this material came from direct conversations with him. As I'm sitting and talking with him, I am writing in my notebook because there is no possible way with all of the other things I'm trying to accomplish that I can remember word for word what he is telling me. This to me is as important a part of this project as these photographs. So I also tried to make, and I've mentioned this before, standalone images that were strong enough to stand on their own. I was not sure I was good enough to do that anymore. Lots of doubles, etc. Sports like alpinism and swimming were strictly controlled. If you were strong and you were good and you were professional, you could escape Albania. So I made this double exposure, and then this quote, wow, the battery died. That's the first for me, the first time I ever used an entire battery in my Sony camera. And it died mid-sentence. No idea what I was talking about, but we're gonna go back. So oversized copy, standalone images, double exposures. This quote came hours after I made this image, but it came while I was on a bicycle riding around Lake Shkodra, which is where this was made, and I had to stop the bike and write this down because it was too good to lose, and I knew that I would never be able to remember it all. And again, I said earlier, stream of consciousness. This one did not come from a conversation. It came from me sitting at breakfast, having a hard-boiled egg. I remember exactly. And I was writing in my journal the observations and stream of consciousness that was around me. Again, standalone images, etc. That is how I use the journal during a documentary project. It's not a stressful thing. It's not a public thing. It's a personal, fun, incredibly strategic way of trying to do long-term projects, because the images often are not enough. Even if they're good, people are going to have questions and they're going to need to know things that the images might not tell them. So my advice is to start, and start today. There's no need to wait. There's no need to procrastinate. You don't need a fancy journal. I do, however, think that these are very worthwhile to add your own work into these journals, so that when you're writing, it reminds you of successes that you had, of things that you've done that you like. Start now. Don't stress. Don't worry. Don't need the right pen or pencil or anything. Just do it.